Hi there, Scott Page here with episode 3 in my series on transmitters using OpenTX 2.0 and beyond. This episode I'll call Examining the Mix. What could go wrong? In episode 2, I made reference to the fact that my model tended to climb when I added throttle. I speculated that adding a bit of down elevator based on how much throttle is being used would be a possible remedy. I'd like to explore that concept a bit more today. And in doing so, I'm also going to spend a little bit of time looking at and setting up curves. If a model climbs or descends when changing throttle, you have a thrust line problem. What is a thrust line problem? Well, that's when the line of thrust from the motor does not match the pitch axis of the airplane. When this is the case, as throttle is increased or decreased, the airplane is forced off track. This can be annoying, and in the extreme, it can cause the pilot to begin looking for a bag in which to collect the pieces. Most true modelers will tell you to fix the thrust line by shimming the motor's attachment to the firewall using washers. This is also done to add right thrust to compensate for motor torque effect on the aircraft's yaw. Mechanical adjustments are the preferred method in an ideal world, but sometimes I'm content to live in a less than ideal world and fix flight behavior with channel mixes. Yes, technology can be a beautiful thing. In the previous video, I set my throttle to add down elevator at a rate of 10% of the throttle input as the throttle was increased or decreased, and I set this up in the elevator channel. I chose that number randomly. I didn't and still don't have a clue as to whether or not that actual number will be what I use in the end. It's just a guess based on experience to get me in the ballpark. Also, in a real application, I'd want to be able to turn off the mix in the event it was radically wrong. I might even want to have more than one value to try. If you're not sure what a mix is, just think of it as a channel trim value that changes dynamically depending upon what another channel is doing. Mixes are commonly used to coordinate turns by mixing in a bit of aileron into the rudder control channel. In this case, I'm adding throttle input to the elevator channel, so as the throttle value increases, it will also increase the overall value of the elevator input. So I'll pick up where I left off last time with my elevator on channel 5 and the throttle mix line adding 10% of the throttle as down elevator. When setting up mixes for the first time, it's very important to give yourself the ability to shut off the mix in the event that it behaves badly. The first thing I want to do is put this mix on a mechanical switch. I'll use G switch so the mix can be turned on or off. To do this, I'll double click on the mix. I'll set the mix to be on when G is in the up position and off in any other position. I might also want to assign a sound to inform me when I have the mix on or off. The procedure for assigning sounds I'll cover in a later video. I'd also like to have a couple different mix options to try while flying, sort of like going to the optometrist when he says better or worse. To do this, I'll duplicate the throttle line in the elevator channel 5, so I right-click on it and choose Duplicate. And now I enter the edit by double-clicking on it. I can change the weight to 5, but I also need to give it a different switch. And to make it consistent, I'll use the G switch in the middle position. This way, when G is up, 10% mix will be active. When G is in the middle, 5% mix will be active. And when G is in the down position, no mix will be active. In order to keep things simple, I'm only going to show how to set this up using two possible values. However, it is possible to use a knob or a slider to adjust the throttle mix in the fly. Now let's check this mix in the simulator and see if it works and find if we have any potential problems. So I'll start off by going to the mixer. I'm going to move the throttle stick all the way to the up position, and G is in the up position. I see the mix works because when I move the throttle stick, I can see the value moving in channel 3, which is a throttle channel, but it's also moving at a much reduced rate in channel 5, which is the elevator channel. If I set the throttle to full, I see the value of channel 3 is at 100, and the value of channel 5 is about 10% of that value. So my mix with G in the up position is working. Now if I move G to the middle position, I now see that the value of channel 3 remains the same, but the elevator has changed to just 5% of that value. Also, if I put G in the down position, I have no value in the elevator channel. But I've also noticed that I have a problem which is kind of unique to using the throttle channel for a mix. You see, the control surfaces have their center point at 0, but the true 0 point for throttle actually yields a negative 100. Switching off the mix causes the elevator to move toward actual 0, not throttle 0. And this is going to cause all sorts of problems. I need to make an adjustment so that when the throttle stick is all the way down, the value delivered to the mix is 0, and when the stick is all the way up, the value delivered to the mix is 100. In order to fix this, I'm going to need to either use an offset or a curve. And I'm going to use a curve because it gives a wider variety of setup options. OpenTX Companion has a fabulous curve generator. To make a curve that'll work for this throttle mix, I need to have the value of the input start at 0 when the stick is at negative 100. And I can do this fairly quickly using the curve generator. The point of a curve is to change the input value to a value different from what it would be if it wasn't acted upon by the curve. Effectively, this means as I move my stick, which is represented by some value on the X or horizontal axis, I'll generate a return value, which is where the line crosses the Y or the vertical axis. So in this case, I need this point right here to be the beginning of my mix, and I need it to end here, so that when my stick is at negative 100, then I'll have a value of 0, and when my stick is at positive 100, I'll also be giving positive 100. And I can do this by setting up Y at X is equal to negative 100, or where the stick position is, to 0, and where Y is, when X is at 100, which is where the stick is all the way advanced, is at 100. And I apply that, and now I have a straight line curve. Now that I've established this curve, I need to apply it to the mix. To do that, I go back to the mixes, double click to go into this, and I'll change this curve line to be curve and set it to be curve 1, which is the one I used. And I'll do the same thing when G is in the middle. Again, I choose curve and curve 1. So now if I go to simulate, I'll see that when my stick is all the way at the bottom and G is up, it's giving 0 value. As soon as my stick begins moving up, I see that I'm also giving a value that's moving up on the elevator channel, channel 5, until I get all the way to the very top, when it yields a value of about 10% of that amount. When I'm right in the middle, it's at about 5, and I'm kind of close to the middle. So that works really well, but things are not always so clear-cut, and I might find out that I need a curve that has no effect at low throttle settings. So what I want to try to do is configure the line so it has no effect for the first 25% of the stick movement and is the linear after that point. So I'm going to go back to the curves and I'm going to kind of rough this out. I really only need to have 3 points, and rather than having a fixed X in the middle, I'm going to go ahead and set it up with a custom X. And the custom X, if I want to have it at a quarter of the distance of travel, that's going to be at negative 50. So I'll type in that right here at negative 50, and then I'm going to want to have it be 0 along this entire point, and then the last value is going to be 100. And now I have a curve that as my stick is moving, is advancing, it should be giving a value of 0 along this entire point. Once the stick reaches a value of negative 50, it should then begin advancing. So let's check the simulator and see if this pans out. So starting with the stick at 0, I see that channel 5 is at 0. And as I start to move the throttle stick up, I've moved up to negative 52, and I see that the elevator channel still has not moved. And then once I break past 50, it starts to climb. And so it's working really well. And then if I wanted to switch to G with the middle value, I'd see it works as well. It's only 5% the value. But again, it doesn't move until I hit right there at 50, and then it begins to climb. And if I turn G all the way to the down position, then I have no mix affecting it whatsoever. One other type of curve I may want to try is smoother, and we refer to these curves as exponential, or just simply expo. Generally with expo, we want the motion of the stick near the center, or in this case at the lowest throttle, to have less effect than the motion as we move the stick farther along. expo for a regular control surface would resemble an S-curve. However, for throttle, it's going to look like a simple growth curve. So let's go over to curves again, and let's set this up for expo. I want it to be nice and smooth, so I'll use 17 points. I'll choose smooth here, and I chose a coefficient of 50. So as I apply that, now I get this sort of a curve. The higher the number, if I go to 100, for example, then I'll say I have very, very little change in these low values, and it changes very dramatically as I get higher up. Well, we've learned how to put a switch on a mix, because the first time you use a mix, you definitely want the ability to kill that mix in the event that it makes things much worse rather than making them better. We've also used a 3-position switch to give the option of trying 2 different mix values or no mix at all. And finally, we've taken a quick glance at the Curves tab and created a custom curve so our throttle mix is ineffective until we've moved the stick 25% of its travel. In the last video, I encourage users to leave a thumbs up on the premise that I'm an insecure, high-maintenance sociopath. And while that may be true, the real reason to leave thumbs up on videos that are useful is that they'll show up in Google or YouTube searches more frequently and prominently for people looking for help with OpenTX. You can help somebody find this video by simply clicking on the little thumbs up. Thanks a lot for watching. This is Scott Page reminding you to take time out for your hobbies while you still have time to take.